100 Winters, Retracing the Great Race Against Death, written by Jonathan Nathaniel Hayes, illustrated by John Van Zyle, photography by Caleb Gingras. Chapter 4, Tolovana Roadhouse. Photographers and filmmakers often refer to the twilight hours of morning and evening as the magic hour or golden hour. This is due to the sun's low angle on the horizon, which, as it shines through the Earth's atmosphere, creates a warm golden hue and casts dramatic shadows. Now imagine a perpetual sunset, one that lasts the entire day. You've just envisioned a clear winter day in the low Arctic. In late January, this region of Alaska experiences only about 6.5 hours of daylight, meaning that most days on the trail were spent traveling more in darkness than in light. But when the brief daylight hours weren't veiled by clouds or fog, they were an exquisite gift. Scarcity makes any beautiful thing all the more cherished, and so it was when the sun pierced the dark and storm clouds and bathed the land in light. Throughout the expedition, the sun became more precious to me than it had ever been before. Instead of climbing high into the sky, it skirted the southern horizon, delivering a day filled with golden hours. Our first full day on the trail, I made the most of every minute of daylight. We began with about 30 miles on an old trapper line. The temperatures were perhaps minus 20 Fahrenheit, already a 60-degree drop from the previous day, but the air was still and the sun warmed my face despite the cold. The land was relatively flat, but as the team crested a small hill, I could see the old trap line stretching out for miles before me. It was one of the few times during the expedition when I allowed myself to fully bask in the beauty around me and relish the moment. The snow beneath the dogs' paws whispered and crunched rhythmically, steam curling from their mouths and catching in the golden light. But even in this scenery, a quiet anticipation weighed on me. For 3 consecutive days, Jamie and Jeff battled to reach the remote and historic Tolovana Roadhouse by snow machine and were unable. So the momentary glory of this gentle run was not deceptive. I knew the real obstacle still lay ahead. Sharp switchbacks through dense woods, miles of flooded swamps, and finally, just shy of our goal, the mighty Tanana River, flooded, unbroken, and impassable. This morning, I'd set out ahead of the snow machiners, accompanied only by Caleb, who would occasionally race ahead to capture footage of the team, his drone buzzing faintly above the silence before falling back again. I pushed the dogs as long as the light lasted, determined to wring every moment from the day. When the sun finally sank, painting violet and copper across the horizon, I halted the team atop a small hill and fed them beaver and salmon. Yakusha, my yearling, with the inky black coat, looked especially striking, his breath frosting white against his fur. Far behind, I could see the glow of snow machine headlights and Caleb's sled light, 3 beams slicing through the dusk. Then I spotted a 4th. The young Athabascan hunter Leo Huntington had heard that some crazy white men were blazing a trail through the interior, so he joined Jamie and Jeff on his way toward the Yukon River, hoping to hunt wolves en route to visit his girlfriend. His calm, confident presence quickly warmed me. He was conversational but measured, speaking in the low, steady voice common among many men of his culture. Even when soaked, tired, and cold, Leo would amble over with a quiet smile and say things like, Beautiful night. Nice dogs. These dogs look like the kind my family used to run when I was a kid. Real nice dogs. When the machine caught up, Jamie strode forward, axe in hand, expecting I'd stopped due to some trouble. "Oh, just resting the dogs," I assured him. He nodded. "This is where it starts getting bad. 10 miles of swamp ahead, with a 3-mile stretch of switchback trails we cut through the woods to reach the bison enclosure," Jamie explained. The federal government had fenced a herd of woodland bison in hopes of reintroducing them to the region. Past attempts had failed when the herd scattered before orienting themselves. This time, the animals were enclosed for a few seasons to acclimate. I worried how the dogs might react to the bison when we got there, but they passed cattle back home on nearly every training run. Livestock was just a part of the landscape to them. I made the mistake of letting the snow machines go ahead from this break. Time and time again, they broke through the overflow where the dogs could have easily trotted across. We spent hours digging them out, water sloshing and freezing in boots. Then, total darkness fell. Through the black forest, my 16-dog freight team fought tight turns the snow machines barely made. Each time half of my team rounded a bend, the sled and the remaining dogs would be dragged off the trail, slamming into trees and sinking into waist-deep snow. The night rang with the snapping branches, panting dogs, harsh rasps of my own breath in the cold. Druid, my lead dog, was blind in one eye from a branch injury years ago, so I swapped him for Kyra. She had full vision, but that gave me less control. My custom-built sled, christened the Elizabeth Ricker after Leonard Seppala's first partner in Maine back in 25, groaned under the abuse. Built by fellow Mainer Paul Terrio, it was a rugged and worthy vessel, but now it was flexing unnaturally, joints creaking in protest. But there was no time to assess the damage. We had to reach the Roadhouse. At one point, the snow machines had taken a wrong turn, backtracked, and then placed a large branch across the wrong route, hoping the dogs would follow the new track. The dogs were making these decisions without me, however, as I was always around the last bend. Vodka and Kyra decided they'd follow the more well-traveled tracks in the wrong direction, despite the obstacles. They seemed to say, "We've been pushing through brush for hours. What's a few more trees?" As I turned the corner, I watched as some jumped over the log branches while others plowed under them. Then the leaders made the decision to backtrack over the log to take the correct route, resulting in a masterful knot of dogs. Kyra and her son Hatchet became so entangled that Hatchet's tugline began choking her. In my rush to untangle her, she slipped loose entirely, trotting away with an exacerbated huff as if to say, "You're on your own. I'm out of here." I avoided the temptation to give chase to her, to leave the 90-9 for the one lost sheep. Thankfully, she returned in the time it took me to untangle the others. Tail high, communicating loudly with every expression, "I found the trail. Hook me up, and I'll lead the way." She stood stoically at the front of the team until I reattached her. Eventually, we reached the tall fences of the bison preserve. Herds loomed on either side, silhouettes shifting against the snow. As I attempted a sharp turn near abandoned farm equipment, my game line snagged, tangling again. By the time we reached the Tanana River, the snow machiners were huddled at its bank, their machines idling like beast-breathing steam, taillights glowing red against the snow. Jamie revved ahead alone to test the ice without his freight sled. His lights dwindled to a pinprick in the dark, then returned, his machine howling back across the river's fragile skin. 7 brutal miles followed. Snow machines repeatedly plunged through the thin crust into overflow, forcing the others to wrench them free, while ice water soaked gloves and froze stiff. At one point, Jamie's snow machine broke through the ice, creating open water. Jeff swung left to avoid it, and his sled widened the hole. Then the others did likewise, swinging left or right to avoid the danger until there was a stretch of open water nearly 10 feet wide and 20 feet long directly in front of my team. By the time they freed their machines from the drink, my dogs were so frantic to cross and rejoin the rest of the group. They lunged so hard that they snapped one of my snow hooks loose. With both feet braced on the brake, I could only watch as they surged forward toward the icy water, Vodka and Kyra charging at the lead. If you can't beat them, join them, I thought, jumping off the brake and yelling, "Yeah, yeah!" Pair by pair, they leapt in. Vodka and Kyra hit first, swimming powerfully before clawing their way onto the far side. The others followed, splashing through one after another. By the time my sled reached the water's edge, most of the team was across and pulling with everything they had. The sled's nose hit the ice on the far side, my weight pushing the tail down into the water. Then, with a sharp "yeah, yeah," they ripped me forward so hard that the ricker caught air as we launched back up onto the ice. We finally arrived at Tolovana Roadhouse, the last original roadhouse standing along this historic route. Perched at the confluence of the Tolovana and Tanana rivers, it had once been a hub of regional mining, trapping, and winter travel. A century ago, it was the second stop on the busy dog sled highway between Alaska's interior and the coast. But today, nothing remains of that bustling settlement but this single log cabin. The roadhouse is now so remote that Mary Knight, its gracious owner, couldn't reach it herself in the current conditions. Still, in true sourdough fashion, she'd given us permission to make ourselves at home. The other roadhouses? Fire claimed some. Spring floods and eroding riverbanks took more. Now Mary was raising funds to move the roadhouse further back from the Tanana's edge before it shared their fates. After feeding and bedding down the dogs beneath the clear star-punched sky, I stepped inside and let the weight of history sink in. I've always felt it deeply, whether standing on a Civil War battlefield in Tennessee where I grew up, or walking the grounds of Poland Spring Resort in Maine where Sapala and Ricker ran these very dogs. And here at Tolovana, I felt that same reverence. I stooped through the low doorway from the deep snow outside and into the cabin's dim warmth. It was almost as if I heard a voice say, "Take off your shoes from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground." Of course, I didn't literally hear that, and I don't say that irreverently. But this expedition, these dogs, this moment, it felt like destiny. I was standing exactly where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to do. I was even the same age Sepala had been when he ran this route a century ago with the ancestors of my dogs. Maybe this place wasn't sacred to anyone else, but it was to me. "If these walls could talk," I murmured, brushing my hand along the rough-hewn timbers, "what stories they'd tell." Inside, Jamie had a fire roaring in the stove. Jeff was busy over dinner. Caleb was filming B-roll footage. They were bone-tired after a day's labor. I pulled out a bottle of Tennessee whiskey I'd brought for just such a moment. None of us were big drinkers, but we passed it once around the room. "To Wild Bill," we toasted. Leo handed it back with a smile, and I tucked it away again. I thought of Wild Bill Shannon, who ended his run in this very cabin, face half frozen, thawing his lead dog, Blackie, by the fire, while mourning the 3 dogs he'd lost to the cold, cruel Tanana, before handing the serum to Athabascan musher Edgar Callens. Yakusha, my lone black dog, and the youngest of the team, curled near the fire, soaking up its warmth and rare indoor socialization, just where Blackie might have lain. I watched him, and I couldn't shake the feeling I was sharing this space, not just with my present companions, Jamie, Jeff, Caleb, and Leo, but also with the ghosts of that first great relay. That night, Leo sat with me, his calm, low voice speaking of the trail behind and those miles still ahead. Leo's quiet gratitude that night on the trail lingered with me. He unintentionally taught me some of the native wisdom that helped his people flourish here in the harsh place. Here, where the cold can kill and the trail shows no mercy, his words and demeanor reminded me that traveling these miles requires more than grit. It requires a heart of gratitude. Pausing long enough to see the beauty in the hardship, that's what carries a man through. Beautiful night. Nice dogs. You're listening to the new book, 100 Winters, Retracing the Great Race Against Death. If you're enjoying listening to this, I ask you to do a couple things. First, reach out to us and let us know. You can reach out to us on social media or through our website, Mush Maine, or check our website or check Amazon and purchase a copy of this book. That would mean a lot to us. We look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to sharing the next chapter of this book with you. So stay tuned and make sure that you subscribe.